John Charles. I'm live. I'm at West Seattle. Everything that's been going on has to be put in perspective in a proper manner. I understand that. It's difficult to do this. But what we had was, as you can see out here, a barge setup, okay? This barge setup was used by my family. It was one barge. Now, that is Salty's. We're at the port. And it's hard to get, I can't get a close-up. But the barge is on the other side, and it was pulled in illegally. Okay, the port knew about this. So Christine Gregoire was aware of what was going on when she tried to make the fake family line with Trudeau and Mercier and Urquhart and Biddle out of Canada into the trust fund. They're just trying to associate this with I have Canadian finance I can't get to. But the crime is really old, so this is about the time of the murders of my real parents, and this is how complex it is. So we said Mark Hudson was involved. Now we know about a Bill Toland, and Bill Toland was involved with the port. So they knew about the barge moving in. There's also a house over here on Lotus that was my family's. It was right above the barge, and there was always a boat here. And I always knew it sat right over here. That boat, they would row out to it and then they could go out to the barge. Now they would say it had Rick's signal on it. That's my brother's, and that was confusing to me. But we know Rick was switched. So if Rick had come down here or anything, we know that Toland was involved. They also said Toland was with Colton Geck, my great-nephew, last week. So Toland moved out and the Roths took over the computers. But it got really confusing because we knew Toland was downtown, and they had moved gold downtown by down by the trade winds on 2nd Avenue to one of the little bars. And Sholan Mafia and Ethiopian Mafia took a lot of the gold. And that didn't make sense. It didn't make sense at all. So we assumed that if that was his son that was down there, he may have been murdered. Now they know, he said he went down towards Boeing and they moved things. And they tried to say he went to Dubai is what somebody just said. But let me get back to this. Lotus is a road over here. A policeman took over that property and built an apartment complex called the City Lights. They tried to kill me over there. Now we know Richard Griffiths was involved with the lumberyard here in West Seattle in changing names to obscure names from my family on the trust a long time ago with construction workers. So David Griffiths' family is very illegal with Frugina, his ex-girlfriend, and Jaffer were involved in that mafia. So that's construction mafia. So how it's set up apparently is he had the house right above there. So we had different family and different people my dad had set up in these homes. Well, they're not there anymore. Or if they were there, they were involved in the crime and putting the marker of my brother on a little sailboat here that would go out there and make it look like it was legal to pull things off. Okay? So now we know the name is Pridem that was involved. Pridem or Pride. It could be Pride linked to Boyer and Halpin Candies here in Seattle. So they were down a little bit further towards Boeing, actually by Boeing Field on the properties that link to the railroad. So let me explain this. They've moved it in and now they're destroying the barge. The barge is mine. It's worth, $1 million. And now they put they're docking different people on the dock, which probably has a satellite puller. A satellite puller. It was almost an accident. Everybody's gonna be okay. It was real close. Dangerous. They're speeding. I'm trying really hard to keep my head on straight here, but wherever Pridem went, or whatever happened to Toland, we now know that whoever's involved with the satellite program is using this as a mark, trying to say, whatever they're moving out there, I would assume is purchased illegally, okay? And that's illegal supply chain that I'm losing. All these accounts today, they're in hedge funds, they're in, let me slow down because it gets really confusing because this mafia over here right now is linked to Sublin, okay? And Sublins are out of London. There were British ladies. We called them Shailers at one time. They're the ones who went into the old, the very old like Wrangell and Lippe and Werle. And were stealing the jewelry and distributing it and taking the finance and selling it with a group right by me on Queen Anne Hill, okay? So those women were distributing in the name with Chauvelin markers, which were little children that were murdered, okay? So Siebelin Corporation is also German. It isn't British. So the gang that came through here and started moving it, which they're doing, and it's being distributed, I'm not getting one bit, is linked to Linda Sevlin, Linda Kransky, Officer Oberholzer, Sam Hurst, Officer Sam Hurst, who claims he's Secret Service. This is a real big mafia. Stephen Krallis is involved. Krallis involved in stealing all the property documents out of Windermere with his female gang. Okay, this is really huge because they're trying to take over properties across the country and international, linked to something called the Landmark Trust. So they're linked to Dave Rosen and the Wymans. This is linked to Weyerhaeuser Corporation. The crimes of me not being able to get to my lumber and timber, my U.S. plywood, which is linked to the port. The port station is over there. Now we know Breuler was also one of my German wires. Japanese mafia in Vegas and Filipino mafia took into that. So whenever the Breuler men who were trying to take finance came into town, they were killed. Which is interesting because Breulen was the name of the marsh down by San Francisco that's linked to properties very close to the railroad that Ann Schultz has priority on, but I have accounts with, okay? This is really interesting because when Pfister went into it and took it down to Trancam in Florida, we also had named Dotson tried to go into it. Also, I'm sorry. This is when Malaspino got involved with Massey's. The Massey's got involved. There's also a Japanese Massey's. So we see a big Japanese mafia linked to the Sony Corporation, Zenith, Motorola, Quasar, the Chang Mafia, TSANG. That's Chinese mafia linked to the Japanese mafia. These people are very illegal, and they're actually up in the San Juans, well, on my properties, and in boats and yachts with my money. Chang is horrible mafia. G is involved in this mafia. There's a half white, half Asian mafia. But more importantly, we're going to focus on this property over here on Lotus Avenue and City Lights Apartments and the house that's up there that sat above the port, which is a port view to the actual storage station, which was the barge right out here. That was one of them. So what they did was actually move it up through the hill, instead of using the little sailboat to take bits and pieces out at a time, without any signal or priority. Not knowing about that, I knew about that, but that's what the old schools used to do. So you have to understand, Krallis is linked to Crayley or Crabley, and that's London. And a lot of my money has moved to Manchester and Leeds. And Albrecht is linked to that, and so is Barron's. And they're linked to Sao Paulo, Brazil, strange ownerships in London, and also Albrecht, Ottingen, Spielberg. And they're here today. They're trying to steal with somebody called Oleana, Dave Albrecht, with Pels. Dave Pels has people here. Now, they've broken into Welf. That's my grandfather, Welf 1, Welf 2. This is Royal German, and this is what we have preserved. And a lot of it was for me to go ahead and put in museum exhibits and my family to be able to travel with. The passports, all these things, all the travel information, all my family information to meet with the important banking contacts and the historical bank is stolen by these people. So Krallis, Crambley, we believe because the Krallis and Crayleys were in Santa Barbara, Prince Harry really has to be watched. This isn't a joke. The Santa Monica Pier crimes, this finance being released illegally up here in Seattle for a long time with bankers that are linked to these people. Now, Gregoire is a senator. She's linked to Patty Murray, and they're linked to Dixie Lee Ray. So they had a lot to cover up because they didn't want to pay. And Hydroelectric was released. Their little cover-ups have turned into international cover-ups because what's really going on right now is there's a huge East Indian battle going on with the Brazil and South American mafias, Suez Canal, Panama Canal. India is trying to take over identities of Prehop, Hablos, and Preblos, okay? Reblos is definitely in Brazil, okay? You have to understand, this gets really confusing because Those are markers embodied within my trust. And they'll switch the names around a little bit. So we have little Pueblos that do horse racing, they're white kids, and they use them to move money to Dubai, then drain the accounts. And they seem to be involved with this Crayless gang. These are European women. So that has to be stopped because these kids their lives are in danger, okay? We still have the Pillian gang. They're trying to kill Calhoun markers. They were trying to kill Frambo markers the other day linked to Dokes. They wire children, they kill the children, try to wire into the children, find the location of where they're held up, and they send black mafia into kill to take over the markers with the African mafia. Or they'll sell to anybody, but those are who I live by, they're murderers. But to understand, you have to understand Tata is in the Defense Department. They're in auto, that's my auto. They never paid for it. The Jones trials, okay? In auto, this is very important, Mitsubishi. They linked to Cebu Corporation in Japan. Now these are people that own money, but that big triad right there of what we're talking about right there is huge international mafia. Now, when you think about what I'm talking about, India is Tata, right? They went in the Defense Department. Why, we don't know, but we know now from other Indians they did kill when they went in the Defense Department, and this is huge. Electric auto. What they're doing now is because of the amount of money that went with Lebanon when they moved a freighter out of Seattle with the Greek mafia and dropped it off and it got blown up in Lebanon, and they took over the finance and moved millions of people down to Brazil. So it had South American and shipping finance in it, okay? So that mafia in Brazil has Middle Eastern ties, okay? No mistake about it. But now India was being killed, and as India robbed and killed over 1,000 Prelar kids, and Kryler, and that's gold, Kryler, Kriblin accounts, they were white children, they were mismarked, and that's Japanese mafia, and we get back to the other ones. So this is gonna help a little bit, kind of get people's heads on straight to understand how many people have been killed, children have been killed, to take markers. And when you see adults with the markers, they're murderers. They had to kill to get the marker. But this Kraulis gang, this white gang, they're bald, they're linked to the fire department. So when the Danish fire department came in, they were trying to sell to Denmark. They were trying to sell to, they're buyers, okay? And the cruise ships, very involved in this crime. And that gets a little deeper and harder to understand. But when they were sending people out and they had markers, some of those boats that Ruiz had, De La Rosa, the Philippine mafia, Tom Rios, Japanese mafia, Philippine mafia, Larry Oda, Hashimoto, they were taking them out on the boats and then actually stalling out on these cruise boats and draining the accounts using the children with the markers or the families with markers, okay? And then they were killing them. That's why our population is going down. So when they reproduce these markers is what these bankers were doing. And I'm not sure what country, but now we know that England is definitely really involved, Rothschild. And we know that a lot of the banking legal markers were coming from Chinese bankers. So we know now exactly Kraulis, whatever company, that Kraulis is my marker. Krylum was another one. Shilma, they involved the African mafia, Sheila mafia. Sheila Odoms are the blacks. The Garfields that I talked about, these are people that were given money and used to move money around. And they kill for money. But they aren't the big money players. They will kill for it. But this Azel's Chicken, this gang, the Oprah Winfrey gang, linked to Oprah Winfrey and sales to Oprah Winfrey, the Esquire. The Esquire Club was a black club that Azel was linked to. So they stole the Esquire finance from my family and probably gave it to Oprah. She said she paid $400 million. Nobody sold shit to her. Oprah's a crook. She's linked to Stedman and the Kraulis and the Crambley gangs out of London. Her husband is British. Do you understand that? That is the fact of the matter. She does not own Esquire, and neither does BET. That's linked to communication. So when we talk about the amount of communications information in this boat, not as much, because it's real early. And if they had that early information of the licensing and satellite licensing, it's really hard for me to get because it would have to be put there in 1960. A lot of this was put here a little bit before that, but that's what my father had put together. So that's my real father that was murdered, and we were raised with doubles. So the Jewish community, how they got involved in this over here, I'm not sure, except they knew about it. But the De Hirsch is definitely linked to Seligman, Rothschwein, and the Bischofschwein, and the size that Bernard Arnault in France is stealing. So this gang out of London and Europe and Poland has been selling that finance, that old base side. That's old, that's 1800s. So a lot of that was out here. A lot of those records. Whoever Kraulis is and whoever Pryden is, these guys are big murderers linked to Seattle Police Department that actually identifies the murder linked to the unions, maybe the longshoremen or the port, but it has to be put together a little more. But now we know what Gregoire is. She's a murderer, okay? She allowed that to be moved in. Her family, Grady, and her sister worked at the port, sister-in-law, and they're linked to Trudeau and Mercier. The marriage through, there's a marriage there that links them. And John Urquhart, the ex-King County Sheriff that was linked to Pryden and the police that I've mentioned in the past, and other King counties like Sioux Roar and Faye Johnson, Steve Johnson, and a big mafia that left. And actually, when I tried to get my finance, I was actually assaulted by police when somebody had a knife around me. And they tried to push me. They actually have struck me. I was actually beaten. It's on tape. They never prosecuted. They stole my phones. And that's linked to Zach Fredrickson, that setup. So that phone was released with finance, and they all collectively shared the stolen emails and the information that was coming through on that phone. This is the truth. This is real. I'm John Charles. I'm live in West Seattle. There's a lot more going on. The Kraulis gang saying that Reblos actually came by me saying they want to get my life insurance set up real soon. So they're trying to, the next step for them is murder and then insurance fraud. And that's how, this is how evil this group is. They're blonde, okay? They pulled out with a lot of the finance record and the property records. And they've been shifting people through and back out, in and back out by Seattle Tennis Club on the other side of the lake, as well as the shipping lanes down to the Port of Tacoma. Demlin is really involved in this, and also a lot of New Jersey mafia. Whelan's name's coming up really a lot today, along with Pell's. Pell's out of New York, and Preslar out of Baltimore. Pelosi's name has come up today. They're here. We're in Seattle. My Chesapeake finance is missing. Carol Chin was involved in that crime. She moved it there. She sold it when Camden was built. She was linked to David Stern. Rick Welts was dating her brother. Rick Welts was gay. They were trying to go into Welf. So Welf is my grandfather, so we're back there again. Welf is priceless, okay? Anybody who thinks it's funny to take Welf and tear it apart, as well as Kallenberg, Hanover, and these accounts, the Hosberg account they're trying to break into today, that is those are my grandparents, that's mine. That's not an object. Those things, I got somebody who thinks it's funny right here. So, you know what? That's gonna be about it for him. Welf is not funny, okay? Welf is not funny to take it apart. It's priceless, and that's death in Europe. That's death. I'm alive. These guys tear it apart. Yeah, right. I'm John Charles in Seattle. I'm dealing with jackasses with little G's. Those are little half Asians. I'm John Charles in Seattle. Those markers are illegal. My family is Caucasian. We're not married to black or Asian or anything. I have enough problems with white people without this fucking Asian mafia banking bullshit. Stephen G, David G, the G families, possibly linked to Maxi G in Australia. Oh, also, these guys were moving the money. The Sydney accounts were drained. These were the assholes that are moving money to Sydney right now. I'm John Charles. I'm in Seattle.